In maritime-related matters, the federal government has issued a 2-month ultimatum to terminal operators operating at the nation's seaports to integrate the collection of practitioners' operating fee into their platforms to face sanctions. The directive was given after a strategic ministerial meeting with stakeholders on the enforcement of practitioners' operating fee in Lagos, and TVC News correspondent Ifeanyi has the details in this report.
In February 2021, the Council for the Regulation of Freight Forwarding in Nigeria kick-started the collection of the practitioners' operating fee at ports. The Council says that the implementation of the policy is being frustrated by refusal of some terminal operators to enforce the directive. At this meeting convened by the Council, the Federal Ministry of Transportation is seeking to know why many of the terminal operators have failed to comply, in spite of the Memorandum of Understanding they entered with the Council to drive the implementation of the POF collection.
It is a policy of the federal government that payment of POF is a condition precedent to exit of cargoes from the ports. In the performance of our responsibility as a regulatory agency, CRFFN has had some challenges in the enforcement of POF.
It is relevant to note that integrating the POF will promote global competitiveness and build capacity for effective participation in the new African continental free trade arrangement after.
In his resolution, the Federal Ministry of Transportation threatened sanctions against defaulting terminals that fail to integrate their systems in line with stated guidelines within 2 months.
After 2 months, if it is not complied with, we will now begin to look at the sanctions. You can't come to a country and choose the processes of engagement. You have rules in every country on how businesses should run, and they have to comply with that. We don't have any exemption for anybody. Businesses have to be run based on the rules of Nigeria.
The Federal Ministry of Transportation says it will put in place sufficient guidelines to ensure that funds realized from the POF is devoted to professionalization and capacity building of the practitioners. Ifeanyi Eze, TVC News, Lagos.
And our shift and focus to the international front. Japan's consumer inflation will continue to face upward pressure later this year from rising electricity bills and food prices as the recent surge in commodity prices hits the economy with a lag. That's the stance of the central bank today. The Bank of Japan notes that as Japanese utilities set electricity bills based on the average import cost several months before, the upward pressure from rising energy costs will continue to prop up consumer inflation in the second half of the fiscal year that began in April. The recent rise in input costs could also boost food prices further as more companies pass on costs to households. Japan's core consumer prices rose at the fastest pace in more than 2 years in the month of March, raising worries higher energy and food costs could increasingly take a toll on households' purchasing power. In an outline of the report released earlier on Thursday last week, the central bank revised up this fiscal year's inflation forecast but projected price growth to moderate in the following year as the impact of recent fuel price gains dissipate. And in the United States, U.S. natural gas production growth is waning. At the same time, many countries are looking for new suppliers to help break their dependence on Russian gas after Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. The United States is already the world's largest producer of natural gas, but the two mainstays of production, the Appalachian region and West Texas, are seeing growth slow, with companies blaming lack of adequate pipeline infrastructure despite prices near 14-year highs. Since Moscow invaded Ukraine on the 24th of February, U.S. gas prices have soared about 50% as European countries look to the United States, the world's second biggest exporter to sell more liquefied natural gas to wean Europe off Russian fuel. With pipelines in the Permian Shale, the nation's second biggest gas supply basin, filling quickly, analysts expect production growth in that Texas, New Mexico basin could also slow significantly come next year unless firms start building new pipelines soon. Now, the Permian supplied about 19% of U.S. gas last year, and energy analysts also expect benchmark gas prices will average about $4.24 per million British thermal units in this year, which could also be the highest annual average in 8 years. The largest European economies import about 18.3 billion cubic feet per day from Russia, and the United States currently can export about 9.8 billion cubic feet per day as LNG. And still staying with energy reports now, energy ministers from the European Union countries hold emergency talks today as the bloc strives for a united response to Moscow's demand that European buyers pay for Russian gas in rubles or face their supply being cut off. Russia halted gas supplies to Bulgaria and Poland last week after they refused to meet its demand to effectively pay in rubles. With many European companies facing gas payment deadlines later this month, EU states have already a pressing need to clarify whether companies can keep buying the fuel without breaching the European Union's sanctions against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. Moscow has said so far that foreign gas buyers must deposit euros or dollars into an account at the privately owned Russian bank, Gazprom Bank, which would also convert them into rubles. The European Commission has told countries that complying with Russia's scheme could breach EU sanctions, while also suggesting countries could make sanctions compliant payments if they declare the payment complete once it has been made in euros and before its conversion into rubles. After Bulgaria, Denmark, Greece, Poland, Slovakia, and others last week urged clearer advice, and Brussels is drafting extra guidance. Russia on Friday last week said it saw no problem with the decree, which considers the buyer's obligation fulfilled only after the hard currency has been converted to rubles. EU countries have paid more than 45 billion euros, an equivalent to $47.43 billion, to Russia for gas and oil since it invaded Ukraine on the 24th of February, according to research organization, the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air found. Wrapping up business news now, oil prices on the international market fell today in holiday sapped trade in Asia as concerns about weak economic growth in China, the world's top oil importer, outweighed fears of potential supply stress from a looming European Union ban on Russian crude. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude recorded a price dip of 0.17% to hit $104.50 per barrel. Brent crude now sells at $106.90 per barrel, registering a downward price margin of 0.19%. Bonilite's performance is, however, starting the week in the green territory with a price surge of 2.33% to sell at $109.60 per barrel. And for the OPEC basket, crude oil dealers offer $105.30 per barrel, recording an increase of 0.01%.